Welcome back to CBS Sports HQ, presented by Hellmann's, America's #1 mayonnaise. Time now for Mayotivations, where the Colorado Buffaloes, led by quarterback Shedeur Sanders, really control their own destiny to the Big 12 title game and a potential shot at the college football playoff. Now, we have to give credit to where credit is due, and the job that Shedeur Sanders has really done and has earned him the top spot in Tom Fornelli's latest college football quarterback power rankings for the first time this season. Danny Kanell, Jordan Giorgio with you. Tom will be joining us in just a second, but just your reaction to this. Is this right?
So I broke down Shedeur Sanders last week, and one thing that jumped out to me was, and you were just talking to Ryan Wilson about potentially #1 overall pick. Doesn't blow you away with arm strength, doesn't blow you away with running ability, but what he does, he's really accurate. He makes great decisions, and I think he's got a lot of intangibles as far as just leading, being a leader on the field, doesn't make those big mistakes. I think that's going to be an interesting evaluation, but I'm more intrigued by a name that is not on there that I've been giving my man Fornelli a hard time about all season long because he wasn't there in the preseason, wondering where one Cam Ward is. So we'll have to get that answer from him.
We will. Tom now joins us live here on CBS Sports HQ. I do want to begin, Tom, with Shedeur Sanders and the moment that you really pinpointed for yourself to put him atop of this list.
Yeah, I think, this is very much a weekly thing, and it moves around. And I think if you look at last week, like Jackson Dart was #1 on these rankings last week. Ole Miss had the week off. Jalen Milroe in Alabama played Mercer. Not exactly a whole lot to go from there. And Dylan Gabriel had one of his worst games statistically of the season. And meanwhile, Shedeur is somebody who played very well last week in a must-win game for Colorado. And while these power rankings aren't an NFL draft board, that kind of buzz does play a role in where I put guys. And everything I've heard, like I do my own draft evaluations in the offseason. I don't have quite the same amount of time to break it down during the season when I'm trying to figure out the teams instead of the players. But the people I have talked to, nobody has done more to improve their draft position this year than Shedeur Sanders, where beginning at the start of the year, the thought was, yeah, he could be a first-round pick. He'd be a first 2 days, first couple rounds kind of guy. Now, most everybody feels like this is, without a doubt, the #1 quarterback in the upcoming draft class. So when you look at his performance on the field, even if he's been kind of somewhat in the shadow of his teammate Travis Hunter, who is the current Heisman favorite, Shedeur is doing a lot of things very well. As Danny mentioned, he doesn't have a cannon of an arm, but he makes quick decisions, he makes accurate throws, and he doesn't make mistakes. And I think that is one of the key things that teams have really, as far as the NFL evaluations are concerned, have really taken a notice of. So for this week, the way he's playing and the way people are talking about him, I've got him at #1.
The other thing, Tom, that jumps out to me is that 31 sacks, that third in the country, has been sacked that many times, and it doesn't affect his decision-making. A lot of times, quarterbacks, you hit them that much, they start putting the ball up for grabs, make bad decisions, their accuracy affected. Not Shedeur. It's been really impressive.
All right, well, I just know you're waiting for this, right? I do want to get to one thing that you alluded to as we started
Where's my guy?
This segment. Where's Cam Ward? Where is Cam Ward?
I was always told wins aren't a stat, but neither are losses. I don't think they should
Who said that?
either. I don't know. I mean, I've heard that before, so we'll have to see. I do think, and clearly I know that Tom has a philosophy on where the quarterbacks are after a loss, and he's on the bye week, so we haven't seen Cam Ward. But I think the valuation between Shedeur and Cam is going to be really interesting because Cam Ward does have a better arm. He is more athletic, but the decision-making is a little bit dicey, right? He's willing to try to make a crazy throw, and sometimes it gets him in trouble, like against Cal. He had a pick 6. There's always a throw or two within the game that sort of catches your eye. It's like, uh-oh, he did it again. But then he brings them right back. So I'll be curious to know what Tom thinks, potentially if they do win out, where he would put Cam Ward in the end of the season.
Yeah, listen, there's one very solid rule in my quarterback power rankings. If you lost your last game, I'm not going to rank you. So Cam Ward needs to win another game before he gets back into the top 10. And when he does, he'll be right back in the top 5 at a minimum, which is where he has been all season once he, was put into the rankings. He spent more weeks at #1 in my rankings than any other player in the country this year. And to your point, Danny, I do think that will be the primary debate we hear all spring as we head up to the NFL draft. It will be Shedeur versus Cam Cam as the likely #1 quarterback taken off the board. And you kind of hit it, the nail on the head. Cam, athletically, I think is more impressive than Shedeur. It's just decision-making wise, when he is pressured, he does do some head-scratching stuff. He does take chances that you probably can't get away with in the NFL that you can get away with when you're playing against, Virginia Tech or Boston College. So some teams will be scared off by that. But I also think that off-platform and just improvising-wise, when the game script goes wrong, there's nobody in the country doing a better job right now than Cam Ward. And I think some of those mistakes and bad throws are just a byproduct of a guy who's capable of making something out of nothing.
You're off the list if you lose your last game, and you're definitely off the list if you lose to unranked Georgia Tech. Sorry about it, Danny. Okay, I do want to show you this rankings again because I want to pinpoint who's at the 6 and 7 spot. You have Ohio State's quarterback Will Howard and Indiana's quarterback Curtis Rourke. Both of these quarterbacks will square off this weekend. It's the biggest game on Saturday. Ohio State and taking on undefeated Indiana. Who has the quarterback edge this upcoming weekend?
I think it has to. You have to consider supporting cast, which I think Will Howard clearly has the edge, and Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka and some of the talent that he's got around him, not to mention a backfield that is really tough. But I actually love how they're paired right here, and knowing that one of them is going to drop, that's going to be really interesting because I think they've both had phenomenal years. Will Howard had so much hype coming in there as the big transfer from Kansas State who had a Big 12 championship under his belt there. How would he handle the pressure of being the quarterback at Ohio State? Since they lost at Oregon, and there was a lot of criticism coming his way for sliding, too late, not having time left on the clock, he's responded, and he's had big games and after the fact and put this team on the back. And I think from a leadership perspective is where he stood up. And then you've got Curtis Rourke, who came in without much fanfare, like the whole Indiana team, and he's been one of the more efficient quarterbacks in the country, and he's working with a pretty underrated group of wide receivers. So I love this matchup. I think it's probably pretty evenly matched as far as skill set. Will Howard's a little bit more athletic, probably has a little bit more upside, but don't sleep on Curtis Rourke being able to go toe-to-toe with the Ohio State Buckeyes and Will Howard.
Yeah, obviously this is a huge game. It's one of the biggest games of the weekend, and it has a lot on the line. But as far as the quarterback situation, the intriguing thing to me is both of these guys are in somewhat of a difficult spot going into the weekend because it was just announced last night. Ohio State starting center Seth McLaughlin tore his Achilles. He's out for the year. Ohio State had already lost their starting left tackle earlier in the season, and that was before the Penn State game. And we saw Will Howard in that Penn State game, his worst performance of the season. Ohio State was able to get away with the win, but we can't forget that horrible pick six Howard threw early in the game. And while they overcame it, now you're going to face this Indiana team, which defensively is very strong on the defensive line. I'm expecting Howard will be under pressure a lot in this game. How does he handle that? Does he keep his calm? Does he keep cool? Does he use his legs to extend drives and put points on the board for the Buckeyes? And on the flip side, Curtis Rourke, it's been pretty much an easy season for this point for Indiana most weeks. But last time we saw Indiana, they were facing Michigan, which is the best defense as far as talent is concerned that the Hoosiers have seen all year. And guess who had his worst game of the season? It was Curtis Rourke. So now you come back from the bye, and you're facing another one of the best defenses in the country, if not the best defense in the country, on the road in the Horseshoe. This is where we're going to find out how good Curtis Rourke truly is for this Indiana offense. If he's able to go on the road and lead that offense the same way he's done it up to this point this season, I think he suddenly enters that whole Heisman conversation where he'd at least be a finalist, and we'd have to start taking Indiana very seriously. So I think that when you look at these two, this is a huge game for both of them, not just their teams.
All right, so per your own rules, if you lose a game, you're off the list. So does that mean that one of these guys might not be on there next week? I think we lost Tom there, but he did say, oh, yeah, if I could read lips. You can hear more from Tom and Danny on the Cover 3 podcast. Listen and watch wherever you get your podcasts. All you got to do is scan that QR code on your screen.